came across a report on the Evening Standard their website, and it's also being reported by the Independent, sort of a follow-up to this Laurence Fox story that made the headlines earlier in the year. I believe it was about February on Question Time. Um, Now, in of itself, that really the dust should have settled on that one, but this is more information that really reiterates the trajectory of thinking behind this. And basically, the report said that Laurence Fox himself had said in an interview after the controversy that his mixed race girlfriend, who he didn't name by name, had dumped him after the controversy. Um, my thought on that was, firstly, he's shown himself to be a gentleman by not naming her. Secondly, because I assume she's not a famous person, but secondly, you know, really, if she cannot stand by her man at a moment like that, when he's being hounded left, right, and centre, um, then she seems like a pretty shallow person. So it's her loss, or one could say that Laurence Fox escaped because really a woman like that who's so shallow that she would buy into the sort of negative vitriol that was going on against him. It's, he, I would say, got out of that one. Um, it was also reported that the comedian Richard Ayoade, who's mixed race himself and apparently Fox's brother-in-law, I assume that's from a previous marriage or something like that. I'm not quite sure. He was furious with Laurence Fox after that, but they've subsequently made up. They're friends and they've subsequently made up. So this just reiterate a little bit, and then I want to express how I feel about this controversy because, as far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't be a controversy. It's not Laurence Fox that turned it into a controversy. It's others. Anyway, the background is Laurence Fox, if you don't know, is a British actor. He's done mainly TV work. He starred in the series Lewis, which was a British detective series set in Oxford. Um, and that's probably his best known role, but he's done other work as well. I wasn't overly familiar with him before this. I knew of his role in Lewis, but I didn't. I must admit, I didn't. I wasn't a huge fan, or I didn't follow his work that closely. But anyway, he was on the panel of Question Time, which is a current affairs debate show. This was before the lockdown when they still had a studio audience. And usually they have mainly politicians, but they also have business people, activists, occasionally people in the arts, in this case, obviously an actor. So they were discussing the issue of Meghan Markle leaving the UK and the alleged racism around that. Now, I didn't see the whole episode, but I've seen that clip numerous times where basically a member of the audience who was a university lecturer from Liverpool confronted Laurence Fox because he took the view on this debate. People have different views. Some took one opinion, others took another opinion. And Laurence Fox is certainly not the only person with his opinion that there wasn't any racism involved in Meghan Markle's decision to leave the UK. Now, whether you believe that is the case or not, people have different perspectives on it. My own view is somewhat mixed. I think there may have been some racism involved, but not to the extent that was claimed. Um, anyway, this woman was attacking Laurence Fox and basically on air, to his face, well, from the audience, said, "You're a privileged white man. What would you know?" And they got into a debate, and Laurence Fox is obviously exasperated by this. And he pointed out it was, that wouldn't be accepted if anyone else is saying that to anyone else. But the fact he's a white man, it's okay to throw that sort of abuse at. And really it is because you know, that's not verbatim, by the way, but the video is well documented. It's been seen widely, so check it out. And you'll see the basis of the controversy. But what I really want to focus on here is this idea of white privilege because it's something I have mentioned before. Obviously, I'm a white guy, so it's of interest to me. Um, some might say, "Oh, Nathan, don't take it personally. It's not, the point here is it's not a personal attack." And in a sense, it's not because it's not like you, Nathan Hazlitt, are privileged. But nevertheless, what Fox was saying, and I think he's dead right, is that criticizing him for something beyond his control, the fact he is white and the fact he's male, add straight to that if you want to get into the full sort of identity politics scope of things. Um, she was attacking him for that reason and that reason alone. She wasn't saying, I disagree with you, there was racism at play. She's saying you're wrong because you're a white man. And that's fundamentally the problem. White privilege, to me, is a very, very contentious term. I despise it, to be honest, because of one reason, particularly. Privilege denotes undeserved perks. It denotes wealth. It denotes that if you're a privileged person, you're living a life of relative luxury. That's what privilege means. It's an adjective, that's what it means. So I think, as an attack point, as a way of trying to say, oh, white people haven't been through the same extent of racism, is very flawed. I understand the argument behind it. I understand the argument that those who push it make that white people have not suffered the same institutional racism. And that is absolutely true. We can't deny that. White people haven't suffered the same institutional racism. So, for example, I haven't had the experience of a black man in a shop being treated with suspicion. So, in that sense, yes, there are things that minority people have been through, including the recent past, and even to some extent today, that perhaps white people don't go through. But there is something that is aimed at white people that is not aimed at any other race, namely that people can be openly hostile to a white person because of their skin color in a way that would be deemed as racist with any other group. So to say you've never been a victim of racism is actually interesting because one could argue that very attack point was racist in itself. She was attacking Fox because he was a white man. That's it. And it's not attacking in a sense of, he wasn't physically threatened. Um, so in that sense, it's not comparable to, for example, a black man suffering police brutality. I get that. But what it does do, and what we did see from that, and this proves it is not a trivial thing, you know, um, what we saw from that was an actual campaign to get Laurence Fox blacklisted from the industry. There were two actors from Equity. One of them was mixed race, the other was, I believe he was a black guy. Ca- and basically, they went out of their way to try and defame him, to try and get him to destroy his career, to destroy his reputation. And when Equity flip flopped a bit on this, because initially these two guys kind of made a post announcing Fox, but they done it of their own accord without Equity, that's the actors union, without their sort of sanction to do that. So Equity reprimanded them for implying that they were acting in the name of Equity when they were actually acting as individuals. But Equity did flip flop a little bit. Anyway, a few weeks ago, they actually issued an apology to Laurence Fox over the way he was treated. So that was a good outcome. It should never have happened in the first place. And now, incidentally, the two guys that tried to launch that smear campaign against Fox, um, they are now having a tantrum claiming that Equity thrown them under the bus. They and their supporters, I've seen their Facebook pages. It's full of bitter posts about Laurence Fox and about white people. Um, but that shows this is not a trivial thing. It shows that if you're a white person and you take issue with this, you're going to be attacked. you're going to be attacked as some sort of white supremacist. Now, nothing that Laurence Fox said in that segment of Question Time can rationally be seen as white supremacist in any way, shape, or form. Ultimately, what we had was a white guy who refused to apologize for something beyond his control and who happened to have a difference of opinion on a topical subject at the time. Um, so I think the way Fox was treated was a complete disgrace. Now, to be fair, he didn't entirely help himself afterwards. He made a comment about the film 1917 regarding the depiction of a Sikh soldier in that, which he immediately apologised for. Basically, he said it was just political correctness, but we know that there were Sikh soldiers in the First World War. Anyway, Fox knew that he was wrong about that. He immediately apologised. He also said that he wouldn't date a woman under 35 because they're woke. Um, so, he's not exactly a shrinking violet, but maybe some of that was blowback, a coping mechanism, kind of a bit of a self defense mechanism, using humor in a sense to deflect from the onslaught of left wing attacks that he was getting. I mean, The Guardian actually had a pathetic article that, that was entitled The Radicalization of Laurence Fox, as if he'd become some sort of far right terrorist. And what really troubles me about that sort of notion is that it actually means that real racism, that is, well, we do have problems with white supremacists or black supremacists or other forms of racism, gets downplayed because it's so thrown around by the likes of the Guardian and the left, the regressive left. I won't say the left in general. It's just really, really saturates the debate from any sort of intellectual merit because it devalues the real problem. So I can understand, discussion about things that may be uniquely or not uniquely, but more impact black people or more impact South Asian people. But I still say the concept of white privilege is incredibly problematic because it puts all white people. Not only is the term itself flawed, i.e., privilege, but it lumps all white people in one category. And the people who use it will claim, "Oh no, we're not doing that." You are. If you say white privilege, you could not generalize any other race in that way. Get away with it. Even when I've spoken about the Pakistani grooming gangs, I don't say that's all Pakistani men. I don't say that's representative of every South Asian man in Britain because it's not. It's a problem within the community. It is something that Sir Trevor Phillips rightly raised concerns about, and he was shamefully kicked out of the Labour Party for telling the truth. So that shows even minority people, Trevor Phillips is black, who go outside this sort of group think that the regressive left have, will find themselves targeted. And it is extremely intolerant, but just as importantly, it's dishonest. So saying all white people are privileged is factually just not true. Where is the privilege for a white homeless person? Come to think about it, where is the privilege for the white victims of the grooming gangs? They were predominantly white teenage girls. In fact, there was a racial component because the perpetrators saw them as easy. They saw them as cheap. So the perpetrators had a racist way of looking down at those girls. And there is a lot of issues around that. There's legitimate questions, for example, as to where the parents were. But the fact remains that these evil men targeted these girls in places like Rotherham and Rochdale. So why do we? Where does that fit into white privilege? When we see homeless people, they're from all races. You get black homeless people, Asian homeless people, but why are white homeless people somehow more privileged? I had a debate with someone recently who came out with the ridiculous claim that white homeless people still have more rights than black and Asian homeless people. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish. That's insinuating that homeless charities discriminate, which is just baseless. She didn't say that, but that would be the insinuation. So summed up, you cannot just jump to conclusions about other people. You cannot think that because someone is white, they must have had an easy life. They may not have suffered institutional racism in the same way, but they could have suffered in other ways. And you might retort, oh, it's nothing to do with the race. But the point is, it flies in the face of this idea that all white people are privileged. Most white people aren't privileged. The only supposed privilege is that they haven't had the same extent of institutional racism. But today, the vast majority of white people denounce that racism, and we have strict laws against discrimination. There are still problems, I would say, particularly in the United States. I do think that there are double standards with the way black people are treated by the police. I do think there's real issues there. But I'm not saying that everything is perfect for minority people. That's not my position. It's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is it's also not perfect for white people. And the notion of white privilege, it's such a hateful and dishonest term. And it is used by people to try and stoke up animosity, to try and stoke up resentment. I believe it's hateful. I really do. I believe it is used by people to try and sort of stoke up this idea, oh, be suspicious of your white neighbors because they've got more than you. It's fundamentally a very toxic thing, and I think it needs to be robustly challenged. And I'm not a huge fan of Laurence Fox, but I am grateful that, and it was refreshing that someone had the guts, frankly, to answer back. And I hope more people follow suit because, particularly in the world of acting, there is a groupthink with this. We've seen it with Oscars So White, we've seen it with these sort of campaigns that really, when you scrutinize them, are pretty ridiculous, or at least aspects of them are pretty ridiculous. Um, There have been a few other examples where prominent white people have kind of fought back. During the Oscars So White thing, the actress Charlotte Rampling said it was racist against white people, and she was immediately attacked and denounced, and she ended up apologizing. I don't think she should have, but her basis was the insinuation that white people don't deserve their awards because they're white and because they dominated. So this mentality of treating people as one demographic. We know that there are differences in society. We know that there are some things that impact some groups more than others. So I'm not ignorant to that. But lumping the whole as one, saying everyone is the same, and that's what white privilege does. It's so wrong. And again, people might say, well, why take it personally? I don't take it personally so much in the sense that I'm not some sort of, being white is not something I'm proud of or ashamed of. It just is. However, I would take it personally if someone used that as a way to be hostile to me. How could I not take it personally? If someone's treating me differently because I'm white, how is that any different from treating someone differently because they're black or Asian? So to say that there's no racism against white people, actually, I'll conclude, I would say the term white privilege is a racist sentiment. Why? Because it generalizes all as one and it directly breeds resentment. You know that's true because if you look at the two actors, I forget the names off the top of my head, who launched this campaign against Fox, look at their Facebook pages. It's full of statements about white people and negative attitudes about white people in general. So yeah, this idea of white privilege does stoke up animosity towards white people in general. And as someone who has always stood against all kinds of racism, I've forcefully spoken out against white supremacists. I've forcefully spoken out. Only recently, I made the video about the xenophobic racist attacks, which that's what they are. So no one can accuse me of not being consistent in my values with this. But that's my thoughts. I think white privilege is a nonsense term that is used to stir up resentment against all white people, and it needs to be phased out. And those who use it need to be challenged.